Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to this very special segment of the Brisbane Market Update. And we have a report today based on the first half of 2022. Yes, 2022. And with that, let's welcome to the studio Asti. Asti, welcome to the show.
Hello, Umesh. How are you?
And very good. And welcome once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share everything that we have found, for the first half of 2022, and especially sharing it for everyone who is currently potentially very frustrated and, wanting to get into the housing market, wanting to buy a house, or is trying to find a rental place. So I'm very excited about sharing this report with you today.
And quite rightfully said, because people are finding it very difficult, especially in the rental market as well. So we will look at this report which has just come out, just been released yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's very newly released. It was released yesterday. It is available to the public free of charge. Anyone can download the report, and anyone can have a look through it just to have a better feel of what's happening in the Brisbane market right now.
And it is always good, to be better informed and know what's actually happening out there, because many times people are at this point in time, everyone's talking about the real estate and all the prices going up, and of course there is always that little talk about maybe what's going to happen with the interest rate. But I mean, all these things keep happening. But real estate. Okay, let's get into this report that's just been put out. So what have been the key findings before we go into the individual reports?
Yeah, of course. Like you said, it's a very interesting time in real estate right now. Even in not just in Brisbane, but across every capital city, whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, or Hobart, prices are at record highs. This particular report, what we've done is that we have separated each capital city into 3 rings, Umesh. So for Brisbane, for example, we've got the inner ring, which is 0 to 5 kilometers from the CBD. You've got the middle ring, which is 5 to 10 kilometers from the CBD. And then you have the outer ring, which is 10 to 20 kilometers from the CBD. So there is what we call markets within markets. So the whole of Brisbane is really big. And when people say the Brisbane market, it can be quite general and it can be quite generic. And that's why we have actually segregated this report into those 3 rings. And we have looked into, what is actually happening inside of those rings. So the very first one is, if we're just talking about general, is that basically Brisbane is at the moment recording the highest prices that we have seen thus far. In the inner ring market, so again, like I said, it's 0 to 5 kilometers from the CBD. The median house price have reached $1.2 million. In the middle ring, which is the 5 to 10 kilometers, median house prices are about $900,000 at the moment. And in the outer ring, which is your 10 to 20 kilometers away from the CBD, median house prices is about $650,000 at the moment. And so, there is quite a difference. So if you are aiming for a house within 0 to 5 kilometers of the CBD, you're looking at double the budget if you, as opposed to looking at a house in the outer ring. So that's 10 to 20 kilometers. And that's generally what we're definitely seeing, not only in Brisbane, but also in Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart, and a lot of other capital cities as well.
So it's always good to look at those rings, as you have just mentioned. When we get into the report, maybe what we can look at is Brisbane house sales. So how did they fare with the median prices?
So Brisbane house sale is at a record high at the moment. So Brisbane in total sold about just above 35,000 homes in 2021, and that is the record amount, because in 2020 we sold in total about 18,000 homes. So at the moment the Brisbane market is still growing. It is one of the more undervalued markets in comparison to Sydney and Melbourne. as I've just said, we've just gone up from about 18, 19, potentially 20,000 maximum sales in 2020 to over 35,000, about the 38,000 house sales, and that's just pure houses in 2021. So that's a massive jump. And even though we've sold more houses, our prices keep on going up, whether it's inner ring, middle ring, or outer ring. The amount of sales have gone up in each of those rings, and the prices have gone up in each of those rings as well. So that means that there is definitely that real returns on capital investment. The market has been undervalued for a while. Brisbane have always been the little brother to Sydney and Melbourne when it comes to prices. And because we've started at a more affordable price point, there is more room for us to grow. Whereas in Melbourne and Sydney, their prices are already quite high, and Sydney prices are very high, and so they don't, even though it still grows, it doesn't have a lot of room to grow the way that Brisbane does. So that's what's been happening in the house sales and house prices at the moment, Umesh.
Okay, so what about apartments and units? So what's been happening in that sector?
Everyone who is looking at units at the moment, there is definitely more space or more availability of units than houses. The reason being is that over the past 5-6 years or so, Brisbane has had kind of like a boom when it comes to unit developments. A lot of units have come onto the market, not so many houses. So a lot of the houses that has been sold are currently owned by people, or it's someone who is downsizing or someone who's moving somewhere else, as opposed to new houses. Whereas in the unit and apartment market, there is definitely more stock available to people. And if any of you are thinking about selling your apartment, you would have noticed that there's been an uptick in pricing. So for example, if you are looking at the inner ring, again, that 0 to 5K, your median price is about 500, 550. If you're looking at the middle ring, about 450, and if you're looking at the outer ring, it's just under 400 at about 380. The number of sales have definitely tripled. So back in 2020, we sold about 10,000 units, whereas in 2021, we sold above 25,000 units. So the number of units sold have definitely increased as well. A bit different to houses. So the housing market has consistently gone up since 2017. The unit market have fared completely differently. It had a bit of a dip. It was a little bit more affordable. Prices fell down a little bit between 2018 and 2020, and that's because we had a lot of units flooding the market, and that's why prices fell. However, in 2021, we've definitely seen a comeback of investors wanting to purchase units, families wanting to purchase 3 bedrooms and 4 bedroom units, and all of that has been driving up the sales and also driving up prices in the market.
And that has definitely been the case. And looking at all the houses and looking at all the 3 rings that we've been talking about, the middle ring and the other. So what have been the breakdown when you look at houses and the house prices in the inner ring or outer ring and the middle ring?
Yeah, definitely. Look, one of the things that I always say to everyone is that because each of these rings have their own characteristics, have their own prices, I always say to everyone, when you are wanting to buy a house, and I know that there's quite a lot of people that are quite frustrated at the moment, is to actually have a look and segregate those rings. Because if you have a budget of about $800,000, you're only going to be able to have access to about 9% of stock in the inner house market. So that's 0 to 5% of 0 to 5 kilometers from CBD. Your chances of buying a house is about 9%. If you decide to go to the middle ring, which is your 5 to 10 kilometers from the CBD, your chances go up from 9% to about 30%. And then if you go outer, which is your 10 to 20 kilometer, then your chances go up from 9% to 30% to about 60%. And the same sort of chances or opportunities are in the unit market as well. So the more that you go outside from the CBD, the more the chance that you will have in entering the market with the same amount of money. So in a way, when you are for those of you who are currently frustrated, it's about looking at different markets and potentially looking at different rings that you're currently playing in to see if that opens up more stock for you and opens up more possibilities for you to get into the market.
And that is obviously very, very good advice there, that broaden your horizons, as they say, rather than just being tunneled in there. So looking at the rings, and of course we've looked at the property prices, looked at the house prices and the unit prices. So on average, what are what's happening with the expectation with the vendors? So are there any vendor discounts, or what's happening generally?
Well, I hate to tell you this, Umesh, but at the moment, everybody is paying way above the first list asking price. So the vendor discount, in Brisbane, normally we have a vendor discount, whether it's in your inner ring or in the middle ring or, in the outer ring, there is always some sort of a discount. But unfortunately for the house market for the past 4 quarters, so that's all of 2020, and all of 2021, we've been seeing a premium instead of a discount. Now, this might sound really, really weird to everybody, but the outer ring is the place where the discount is the highest at about 5%. Inner ring is actually where the discount is the least, where the premium is the least at 2%. So it's a little bit of a game sometimes because, some places release their listed price or their first list price, whereas some places are in auction. But for those of you who can find what is the expectation from the seller, like how much they are wanting to sell, if you look at it from the perspective of where they are in that particular ring, you can sort of figure out that perhaps you need to offer, if you're in the outer ring, you need to offer at least 5% more than the price that they're asking for. If you're in the middle ring, you need to offer anywhere between 3 to 4%. And if you're if you're looking at a house in the inner ring, then you're looking at about 2% premium on top of the first list asking price. And some people will say to me, oh, why isn't the inner ring more expensive? And the reason being is that the inner ring prices is already at $1.2 million. So when we say that you need to add 2% on top of that in terms of your offer amount, that's already quite high. Whereas the outer ring, the median price is still at $650,000, which is half the price of the inner ring. So 5% of $650,000 is definitely still much lower than 2% in the inner ring. So there's a little bit more room for the outer ring to grow in terms of prices, and that's why the vendor premium is higher in the outer ring. And it's the same thing that we're seeing in the unit market as well. A lot of people are paying above the first list price. Vendor discount similar with the housing market, but definitely look into when you are wanting to offer something, particularly if you can get down to that suburb level, because we're talking about a ring right now, and within a ring there's quite a few suburbs. So if you can get down to what is the discount, or at the moment is more likely going to be the premium, the average premium in that particular suburb, you can you get a better idea of how much you need to offer so that you can get the house. So if the average premium of the suburb, and you should be able to find this out either from the sales agent or to read one of our reports, if the average premium for that particular suburb is say 8%, then you have to make sure that your offer price is at least matching that 8% premium, or perhaps above, if you want to secure that house.
And of course, if you really want to secure the house, and we've seen that happening in the market, as you have mentioned before, that people go and paying premium prices at this time. So, we've looked at the discount and we've looked at the prices going up. So, just as an indication of what's actually happening in the market. So, looking at Brisbane, and of course looking at those rings, and I like to say the inner circle, we are in the inner circle. So looking at all the factors. So how long is it taking for a house to sell? Probably, so the average time on the market.
This is probably the lowest amount of days that we're seeing in the market right now, Umesh. I mean, we're talking about 20 days in average. The outer market is selling the fastest, about 22 days in the outer ring. Inner ring, about 29, 30 days. Same thing with units. Units are going... units are a little bit slower, I have to admit. So for example, a house in the inner market can sell within 30 days, so that's about a month, whereas a unit is selling at about 45 days, so just about a month and a half. So the unit is going slightly slower than the houses, which means that if you are a buyer, that's a good thing because you have a little bit more chance to get into the market. But these are definitely the lowest average day on market that we have seen on record thus far. So yeah, properties are definitely selling faster at the moment. And so if you do see something that you like, time is of essence.
And time is of the essence, because otherwise then they complain that we didn't get, how did the other guys get it? So time is of the essence. And one of the things that we have seen lately is, people are pre-qualified for their finance, and the normal things that used to happen, contracts falling over because of finance and not meeting valuation, and of course the building inspections. But these days, many people are even bypassing little things because they really want the houses. So that's what's happening. Now, the other part of the equation is, of course, you touched on that in your intro, was the rentals. So what's happening in the rental scene?
Yes, I mean, the rental market is a very, very sensitive topic. And the reason being that it's a very sensitive topic is because we see a lot in the media of, a particular house or a rental property getting 30, 40 applications a day. We're seeing a lot of very sensitive stories and very heartbreaking stories of families not being able to find a rental house and having to live in a caravan or, in Airbnbs or in their car, and finding it really, really hard to rent. And, those things are just so heartbreaking to see. And that's why we've been calling for a while now for investors to come back to the market, because investors did leave the market for a little while when COVID hit, and there was a lot of the rental moratoriums and also quite a lot of people losing their jobs and not being able to pay their rentals anymore, which of course impacted the landlord's income and impacted the ability for the landlords to pay their mortgages. A lot of landlords sold their properties, and so quite a lot of investors exited the market. And so we've been really calling for investors to come back to the market because there is such a high rental demand. But in terms of prices, prices have definitely been increasing, very much so more in the middle and in the outer rings. So the middle and the outer rings for houses have seen an increase of about 10 to 13% in terms of house rental prices. In terms of unit prices, it's also at a record high at the moment. You're looking at about 450 for an inner ring unit and just under 400 for an outer ring unit. So definitely prices have increased. The amount of rental properties that has been rented have also increased. So in the housing sector, there's more properties being rented right now, as well as the price increases, which means that people are willing to pay more for securing their house rental. So that's something that, if you are looking for a rental property, knowing how much prices have gone up by will help you when you are offering for a rental property. You know that in the middle and in the outer, which is anywhere between between 5 to 20 kilometers, it's grown anywhere between 10 to 15%. So if you are wanting to really secure that rental property, you know that you might need to pay a little bit more extra, anywhere between 10 to 15%. The unit market is undersupplied. We've rented less amount of units in 2021. And that's why prices have increased for units. So that's why we're also calling for investors to come back and invest in units and buy units again, because from a property price perspective, it has been growing. Beforehand, a lot of unit landlords decided to exit the market because the prices were going down. But now property prices for units are going back up again, and there's definitely a demand for units in the rental market. So it's a bit of a win-win for investors to get into the unit market right now.
And for the investors to get in the market, of course, looking at the property prices at record high as well. But of course, you have just mentioned that the very low vacancy rate, and people are offering more than the advertised price for the rent. So what does that equate to in terms of rental yield? So, looking at what people have to pay for the property and then on the returns.
Yeah, so our rental yield is quite high. In comparison to Sydney and Melbourne, we have one of the higher rental yields across the country. If you are looking at houses, your rental yields can range anywhere from 3.7%, which is in the inner market, up to 4% in the housing market. And so, that's quite a good rental yield. In certain suburbs, you might start to look at 5 to 6% of rental yield when it comes to houses. But definitely one of the reasons, Umesh, that I was calling for investors to come back to the unit market is because the unit rental yields are much higher than the house rental yields. So the house rental yields is ranging between 3.7 to about 4%. Whereas your unit market, it's ranging from anywhere in the 4.9% in the inner market to about 6% in the outer market. So definitely a higher rental yield in the unit market.
And people would have thought sometimes otherwise, but as you have mentioned that it is time for investors to come back in, and probably a very, very good time looking at the yield that we are receiving here. So Asti, once again, thank you so much for being on the show and explaining all this. This is definitely some challenging times that we're living through, but looking at real estate in general, who would have thought, even in the last 2 years, what everyone said in the very beginning, that this will all go down, there'll be a slump, this and that. But this pandemic has proven that people, when they have not been spending money here, there, and everywhere, have actually invested in property. So maybe that's why property has done so well. So this report here is for the first half of 2022. So what are the predictions moving forward?
Umesh, if I have a crystal ball where I can definitely tell you the predictions, I think I might, if I can tell you that for sure what will happen, I think a lot of people is going to be very, very thankful. But at the moment, look, there's a lot of things on the cards for Brisbane. So, we all know that Brisbane has that flavor of the Olympics 2032 coming. We're seeing a lot of developments happen in Brisbane. We're seeing a lot of infrastructure happening in Brisbane. We're seeing a lot of people moving to Brisbane from Sydney and Melbourne. And of course, international borders are about to be open, or they have open for a while right now. And so we're definitely going to see those international students and international workers coming back. So in terms of demand, we're not going to really see a slowdown in demand. We're not suddenly going to see half of the demand go away, we're actually going to see an uptick in demand. Now, supply, on the other hand, is the part that is lagging. At the moment, particularly in ready-to-sell houses, it's very much so lacking. We know there is a supply issue in the construction industry, which is why a lot of projects are being put on hold or they're being delayed, and it has created a lot of supply issues. So demand and supply will always be, at the moment, demand here and supply here. And so because of this imbalance, we're definitely still going to see some growth in the market, and rightly so. Because there is definitely a lot more people interested in real estate. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about the RBA increasing interest rates or the cash rate and how that might impact the market. There's a few things that we need to remember when it comes to RBA. The first one is that they are looking for not just inflation growth, which is what we saw last month. Inflation went up to 3.1%, but they're wanting to see sustained inflation growth. So it's not just a 1 month inflation growth. They want to see at least 3 to 6 months of inflation being at that healthy level before they're doing something else. It's kind of like in life as well, right? If something in your life has changed, you want to make sure that it sticks for a little bit before you make other big decisions about your life. And it's the same thing with RBA. So number one is they're looking for inflation to be sustainable and at a healthy level. The second one is that they're looking at wage growth. So wage growth at the moment is quite sluggish in the whole of Australia. And the RBA really wants to see the wage growth at a healthy level. At the moment, wage growth is anywhere between 1.5 to 2%, and yet the RBA wants to see it anywhere between 3 and 4%. And so we're not quite there yet when it comes to wage growth. And again, if there is wage growth, they want to see that to be sustainable. So whether or not the RBA is going to increase cash rate, you've still got those two things that need to happen before they actually contemplate in increasing the cash rate. So they have said that they're going to hold it until 2024. Because of how the economy is going, it might come forward to early 2023, or it might even be later on this year. We don't know. We don't know what the economy is going to do, what the election is going to do, what the federal budget is going to do. All of that is happening in March and May. So it is a bit of a wait and see. But always remember this. The banks don't always have to follow what the RBA is doing. So they can decide to increase your variable standard rate at any time. There's already banks that have stopped the low, 1.99 fixed mortgage rate that everybody was getting on, the fixed for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. A lot of the non-bank lenders have stopped doing that right now. And so they can actually create their own policies when it comes to home lending and rates and stuff like that. They have that power. And so at the moment, it's a wait and see when it comes to the RBA, what they're going to do. But in the short term, there's always going to be that imbalance between demand and supply. And that's where we're still going to see some growth in the market.
Well, look, very well put there, SD, and I think you can't be the chief economist if you can't understand supply and demand. Going back to the college days, the supply and demand in the economic class, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, well done. And I think we've covered quite a lot today
definitely.
as well. And is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion about the report?
Look, this report was designed to help everyone make decisions. One of the reasons why I love my job and I love real estate is because it is a primary need. Everybody needs a home, right? Everybody needs a home. We're all always going to be making decisions about our home, where we live, whether we buy a new house. It's ingrained in the Australian culture that to build equity, to build wealth is through property investment. And so this particular report, it is the purpose and the design of it is to help you make those decisions. If you are in the market at the moment, please do pick up the report so that you can have a look at what is the current prices, what are the current premiums, where could your money be better spent. Like potentially if you have a certain budget of say $800,000 and you have been scratching your head or you've been hitting the wall because you're not having any luck looking at the suburbs that you love or looking at certain suburbs, picking up this report, you might see more opportunities in other suburbs that you haven't thought of. And then, you might have better luck in those other suburbs. And so this report is definitely designed to help people make decisions, make more better and informed decisions. And I encourage everyone to download the report.
And thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, there you are. You can download the report and you can download that for free. And thank you so much, Asti, for being on the show and sharing this valuable insights with lots of our listeners and viewers. And we will put the key findings of the report in our upcoming Brisbane Indian Times as well. So it will be there as well. So once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Umesh.